What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, I just saw a picture that sent me down a rabbit hole, of course, and it was a picture of the head of the Rapid Support Forces out of Western Sudan, the leader, Mohamed Dagalo, also known affectionately as Mehdi. He was in a photo with the president of Uganda, President Museveni. And obviously he's visiting Uganda, and I thought that was really interesting because the last time I've heard about the RSF, they were carrying out genocides in Western Sudan, again in the Darfur region, against the Masalit people. And obviously, when you're dealing with these the RSF or Sudan proper, you're dealing with a more Arabized African. So I was very surprised that Hermeti was welcome in sub-Saharan Africa, in the heart of Africa. Why would somebody whose groups are carrying out brutal atrocities in Western Sudan walk him down in Uganda? Gonna find out this isn't the first time he's met with President Museveni. And I quickly looked up the itinerary or some of the countries visited by Hamedi, as well as the central government or his opposing counterpart in Sudan, General Burhan. And when I looked at some of the places Burhan visited, they were Eritrea, Turkey, Syria, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. These are traditional countries that you will find an Arabized leader of Sudan visiting. Mediterranean, because of geographic purpose, but especially the power brokers behind that is going to be Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Now, Hamedi's itinerary looks a lot different. He's visiting countries such as Uganda, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Kenya, and Rwanda, more sub-Saharan Africa or southern countries, not so much on that MENA belt. And obviously, what he's probably going down there and saying, and he must be convincing for them to welcome him, is that, hey guys, I can be a good friend to you. And I know things are looking crazy right now in Sudan, but we got a good operations running, and this is how you can benefit from it. This is the only reason why I can imagine that this guy got a heck of a deal that he has for these other leaders. And the premise on that deal is going to be overall stability. This is not going to collapse and make things worse in the region, as well as it's going to be a net benefit to you from a trade or resource point of view. So that got me looking more into this. And I've been doing a lot of videos on the fallout between UAE and Saudi Arabia because these guys were lockstep before, whether that was back in Khalifa Haftar in Libya, whether it was against the Houthis in Yemen, and a lot of things they were aligned on. And they fall out real heavily recently, as we talked about with some of the defense pacts. Saudi Arabia going so far as to have a defense pact with Pakistan, in UAE looking to replicate something similar, or more closely aligned, or just as closely as aligned with India, and bringing in these extra regional players, bringing Turkey in the mix on Saudi Arabia's behalf. And truthfully, I think this Sudan situation, I'm not going to say it was the start, but it probably was the trigger on the fallout. This is the earliest situation where I think these guys fell apart on the opposite side. Like now it's obvious in situations such as Yemen that they're on the opposite side. But I think where it really initially happened was Sudan. And the reason why I say that is because I looked at my old video of Sudan, like, what am I missing? And in that video, I talked about, it just seems odd because usually when you have a rebellion, or especially in this part of Africa, the Saudis and UAE would come in, support their side, and they squashed out the opposition. But that wasn't being happened here. The government was being opposed, and Saudi Arabia and UAE didn't come down on the side of openly, adamantly send reinforcements to Burhan or the RSF. And I've said it must be something going on, like they're backing both sides. But it wasn't they were backing both sides. It was that each member was backing their side. And for the Saudis, it was General Burhan. And for the uh, Emiratis, it was the RSF. And I really think this was the beginning of that split and that contention. There's obviously a battle going on for leadership in the Arab world, and that leadership is obviously going to spill over into the other parts of Middle East, North Africa region, especially in Africa, where you have so many complementary things for the Gulf states, right? You have large populations, massive diversified resource states, but they're extremely poor. Whereas these are countries that are sitting on a lot of money with small populations. So these are massive markets. There's a lot of potential uh, that Northeast Africa benefits for the Gulf states. So you can see this coming apart. And obviously in this situation, you have the UAE opposing Saudi Arabia. And I'm really starting to see the delineation right here, right? Because Saudi Arabia is a monarch, right? It's a legacy system. And the United Arab Emirates, it's in its name. It's the United Arab Emirates. It's federalism. It's united monarchs together. It's built more on I would say a functional or an approach based on meritocracy. Each part's functioning, doing the best, like the United States. It's about federal republicanism in the United States, where it's all about um, in the UAE, they're not as aligned to the tradition. They're aligned to what works. And when you look at where they're splitting, whether that's Libya right now, oh excuse me, yeah, well whether that's the Sudan right now, where you have the RSF with UAE and central government with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is supporting in Sudan, they're supporting the central government. In Yemen, Saudi Arabia is supporting the central government. And then UAE, they're going with Hamedi in Sudan, the guy that can get stuff done on the ground, the guy that's controlling the area, whether that's Western Sudan, and he has strong links and partner up in Chad, as well as resources and ability to get things done in Central African Republic, as well as connect with the strongman Khalifa Haftar in Libya. So same thing with Yemen. Who is the UAE supporting in Yemen? They're not supporting the central government per se. They're supporting the Southern Transitional Council. They're supporting the ports, the part where you have the money, where they can get trades, fees, imports, exports. So you can see that UAE is constantly aligning with the people that can get stuff done. They'll take the strong man, right, over the oligarch or the lineage, the person that's been appointed to such position. And this is not to give too much credit to General Burhan, which himself is a usurper that overthrew the leadership. So it's not so much popular support. But when you look at Sudan, you have to ask yourself, what is Hamedi's end game? And you don't see it. And the reason why is because they can't conquer all of Sudan. There's really no support. Remember, these guys are basically what you would call horsemen or horse riders to the west of the country. It's much more of a real rural lifestyle. It's a lot more of that inner Central African Saharan Sahelian lifestyle. These are not the urbanites. These aren't the oligarchs of the capital of Central Sudan, Khartoum. You know, the highbrow crowd. There's no real connection. This is it. These are two different worlds. So you have Hamedi, who has been extremely successful getting all the way to Khartoum, but has no real ability to conquer the country per se. And of course, he got General Burhan on his back heels, who had to retreat all the way to Port Sudan, right? And a line right there next to Port Jeddah with Saudi Arabia supporting his back. And now they've been able to fight back a little bit to get back to the capital. But Hamedi doesn't have the ability to conquer Sudan. Burhan doesn't have the ability to conquer Hamedi's forces. But the question is, does that matter? Is the beneficiaries of all this work that Hamedi is doing, like, because who really wants to see a peaceful Sudan? That's really the question. Not who suffered, but to whose benefit. Cui bono. So if you have a situation where Hamedi's getting these resources out, these whether it's massive gold, zinc and copper in this part of the world. Also, he's controlling the trade, so custom duties, taxes, etc. If he's getting all these things out, who really cares? The only people that really suffer are the Sudanese people. And the question is, who is going to come to the Sudanese people's aid? Are you seeing any peace conference, any grand reconciliations in the works? No, I think Saudi Arabia doesn't want to lose influence, so they're not going to let Burhan fall. And UAE is not going to lose its golden goose, so they're going to do what they need to support Hamedi. And this is going to be real interesting, especially seeing how things are heating up with Ethiopia. And because if Hamedi does have support of sub-Saharan Africa, all the Africans to his back, your Chad, your Kenya, your Ethiopia, Uganda, this will give him severe ability for defensive depth within the western regions of Sudan, which he already had. Remember, the whole premise of how Hamedi rose to power through the Janjaweed was because the central forces wasn't strong enough to project to the western regions of the countries. They just didn't have the force ability. And Hamedi seems entrenched. And this is why this war is at a stalemate. It's because there's a lot of people winning when neither side is winning. The last note I wanted to call out that was interesting to me was the lack of South Sudan being involved. I haven't heard anything about South Sudan. Now, South Sudan is obviously has a lot of issues going on. Some would say regarding stability, that's to be debated. But I'm surprised that Hamedi hasn't tried to, or maybe not directly tried to make an alliance here to topple Burhan. But and this is exactly the same thing I was just referencing, though. But if you think about it, why do he really? I don't think he wants to conquer Sudan. I think he wants to have his empire in Central Africa, which has made him phenomenally successful and wealthy, which gives him a severe geographical depth. So there is no real end game necessary from that point of view if he's winning at this level of the game. So yeah, I think this is very interesting. But the fact that he's finding so much support, I think, inside of Africa really speaks to this person's ability. And it also really draws out the stark contrast. As I said, I can't find an event that I find more decisive between what we're seeing now between Saudi Arabia and UAE, because these guys were locked arm in arm, and now it seems as though they can't stand each other, and Saudi Arabia is trying to expunge UAE from the Gulf Peninsula, or the Arabian Peninsula. So that's yet to be seen. But this is very interesting, very astonishing. All this in the backdrop of Ethiopia trying to get their quest for the sea, tensions escalated with Eritrea as well. And this guy Hamedi in the background being a major player, linking different parts of inner Africa together to create this wealth machine that it's nothing really, but it's a challenge to the old system. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below, like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. And until next time, take care. Bantu up.